You've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new and exciting season of A Captain's Log, the show where we take you on a whirlwind of Star Trek interviews, breakdowns, top fives, and all the history and the latest news that you need to be known as a full-blown Trekkie. Now, as always, I'm joined by my co-host and one of the biggest Trekkies I've ever personally known. That's Lili Fox-Lim.
That's right. We're back with a brand new season, and I personally cannot wait to interview with the guest we have today.
No doubt about it. Our guest this week began their career on Broadway in New York and quickly made the jump to film and TV, where they have been staying since the 20th century in the 1970s. Though she has starred in plenty of live action and animated shows and movies, our audience will know her most from a little show called Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Can't hold it in anymore. It's Nana Visitor.
Yes. I was getting ready to tell the fans that, but yes, Lili is right. We finally get to the interview of one of the greatest Star Trek characters ever, and that is Star Trek Deep Space Nine's The Intendant.
Bryan, I think you mean Major Kira Nerys. The Intendant was the Mirror World version of her character.
No. We're talking about The Intendant, the one who wore this and wore it well and wore it proudly. Yes. The Intendant was one of the greatest characters ever in Star Trek Deep Space Nine with one of the iconic lines, "I could never make them understand violence. It is a precision instrument. It is a scalpel, not a club." Truly an inspiring figure. Yes.
If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were Mirror Universe Bryan.
No. Of course, the 1 week that I'm late, the big Nana interview. Treachery.
Right.
Computer, open a channel for broadcast.
Channel is already open for broadcast.
Mirror Universe?
Mirror Universe.
Well, welcome back to another season of...
We already introed the show.
Computer, how many people are currently in my quarters?
There are 2 life forms present.
Now, audience, this is an unprecedented turn of events, much like was for the crew of Star Trek Deep Space Nine when they first encountered their mirror world counterparts in one of my personal favorite episodes titled Crossover. But The Intendant is just one of many faces of fantastic acting from Nana Visitor. Don't forget it. The Terran Empire always escapes with our lives. Now, with roles on Broadway in New York, animated shows, movies, and even some video games, Nana has talent to spare, definitely. So, Lili, did you catch him?
No. Oh. But can you check to make sure we're still in the Prime universe?
Yes.
I want to know if we got to deal with one problematic person or a whole universe.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to go check with the bridge.
Okay. All right, the news. This week we're going to talk about and show some images from a new Star Trek book written by Nana herself. It's called Star Trek Open a Channel, A Woman's Trek. This book is a deep dive into how Star Trek has portrayed women over the decades, as well as how Star Trek has influenced real-life women. Nana takes a comprehensive look at these ideas through interviews she did with other female cast members throughout the Star Trek franchise. And you can find Nana's book, Star Trek Open a Channel, A Woman's Trek, from most major bookstores. So, take a second to find your copy, and we'll be right back with our interview after these messages.
A Captain's Log with special guest Nana Visitor returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log. BK and I are just about to start our interview with Nana, who all of our audience should know from Deep Space Nine, but that's not her only sci-fi role. She's also appeared on Battlestar Galactica, Torchwood, and even voiced a character in the recent Starfield video game title.
Oh, yes.
there
We
you
are
are.
definitely still in the Prime universe, Lily.
Whew.
But I have no idea how Mirror Universe Bryan got here or what he wants. It just doesn't make
Ooh,
sense.
I see.
Yeah.
It could be an accident, like in the episode Crossover, but I bet it's more intentional, like in the episode Resurrection.
I had the bridge lock all the life support and flight control so we would be maybe marginally safe on this deck. But regardless, we can't keep Nana waiting or our viewers waiting for this interview.
I know. I'm just as excited as everyone else, so let's get started.
Absolutely. Let's do it. We are pleased to be joined here on a Captain's Log by Nana Visitor. Nana, welcome to the
Bryan,
show.
I'm so happy to be here.
Your family has quite a history, particularly your aunt connection was that she was trained by your uncle, who she eventually married. Can you please reveal who this was, even though you never met your aunt? It still has to be inspiring for your beginnings into performing arts. And also, what are your earliest memories of acting in grade school? And do you have any favorite roles that you played?
My aunt was Sid Charisse, and she was trained by my uncle, Nico Charisse, from the time she was 15. And he gave her those beautiful signature arms that she had. Not to say anything against her legs, which were incredible. She was one of the most beautiful dancers in Hollywood, I have to say. And you can see the Charisse mark over all of it. My grandmother, Calliope Charisse, went to the Paris Ballet as a young woman. Now, to join, and she got in, to join, you're not supposed to be married. She did not reveal that she already had 11 children. So, yeah. So she went home after that and taught all 11 children to dance. And they became this really successful vaudeville troupe that traveled the world. And when the act broke up, a lot of them became teachers. My mother in New York, Nico in LA. So that's how that happened. My earliest memories of, I went to this white glove girls' school in New York City. And I would, to say that I was out of place, my parents were bohemians, dedicated to dance. My father, a choreographer. And I was sorely out of place until finally I got the idea to put on shows. And I raised a lot of money for charities, putting on shows. So directing, assembling them, choreographing them, doing the whole thing. I think I was 14 years old at the time. And then in subsequent years, I kept doing it. So, but that's how I found my place in that particular culture.
Such a cool story. It's crazy how finding something you love to do can actually help other areas of your life.
It just shows you how much feeling safe and good and accepted means to success for someone.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
So Nana, both your mother and uncle were trained by your grandmother, who had a vaudeville act touring the world with her multiple children. This is a story that I truly would love to hear, and so would our viewers, about your family history. Can you tell us about that?
My mother was this really, what she was something of an anomaly. She was a ballet teacher and a coach for Broadway dancers and for people in ballet companies and all this stuff. But there were a lot of people who weren't even dancers who came just to hear what she had to say. She had a way of making people accept themselves and starting from who they were and what they had. And she talked about things they talk about now, didn't talk about back then, like dance with your energy, pile up your bones and forget the flesh. It doesn't matter if you've got, too much this, too much that. You're not dancing with your flesh. You're dancing with your energy and your bones. And she was hugely beloved, and especially by me. When I was 6 years old, that was how I, if they needed a babysitter, class was my babysitter. And I sat on the wooden floor and watched all these incredible dancers, incredible Broadway legends dancing, Tommy Tune, Gwen Verdon, all these, all the best. And I was so bored at 6 that I would play this game with myself of going, okay, you use your imagination however you can. What makes her better than her? Why do I want to look at her? And I started to teach myself the aesthetics of dance. So when I finally got up and danced in my mother's class, I just danced. I already, because I was listening to her words and I was watching the effect and creating a critical mind of my own about it.
Wow, so you're a trailblazer, a strong leadership as a woman situation in Star Trek in particular. Now, please talk about where viewers can get your new book, Star Trek, Open a Channel, a Women's Trek.
First of all, it was a man who invited me to write this book. I did not go, I'm going to write this tome about 60 years of Star Trek and interview as many women as I possibly can and divulge everything about my own life as well. I did not set out to do that. There was this book that he turned out to be my editor, Ben Robinson, had conceived of and thought was a great idea. The women of Star Trek, their picture, a piece of artwork, and maybe a paragraph talking about what archetype they represented. And it went from there. I just said yes. He opened the door for me. I walked through it and then said, okay, how about we do this? And it became a reflection of looking at the shows through, and it's a perfect franchise to do it with because it's 60 years of Star Trek women. And you go back to the 60s, what was the cultural influence? How could we see the 60s culture within the show while they were trying to expand the possibilities for women and people in the future? So it's kind of a complicated road to follow, but I swear to God, I thought, okay, this is going to be, acting can be, heart-wrenching sometimes and just demand a lot of critical self-thought and emotion. And I thought that I would avoid it doing this, that I'd just be watching other people's performances. But as I started to interview women, I started to come up against my own thoughts stuck in another time. And it was like, wait a minute, I don't think that, or do I? Unconscious bias is a really interesting thing. You could swear you don't think this way, and yet your behavior tells another story.
I'm so excited to get to see Star Trek through the lens of some of the most talented women that we have been shaping the show since the start, right? Now, my next question is, this is your first role, Nana, really your first character role in Deep Space Nine as Kira in the pilot episode, Emissary. Now, what was the direction of your character's persona when you were first offered the role, and how was this kind of pitched to you for you to make it your own? Sorry, just a little bit of a confusing question, a loaded question.
No, I know what you're asking. What was presented to me as like, what was the character supposed to be, and what was my reaction to it?
Yeah.
So the only thing that I remember reading was that Bajoran women can be aggressive when they want something. So I understood that I had that leeway. And when I've said this in a lot of podcasts, when I read it, I thought it was a mistake, that it was written for a man, because the first scene, to have a woman speaking to the star of the show, #1 on the call sheet like that, and she's not going to be punished for it. She's a regular character and she's staying, and they're going to work it out. Really unusual for the 90s, almost unheard of, for a character to be unlikable at all, unheard of, unreasonable, have issues, have a past, not be connected to a man, have appetites. I saw it as this character as a doorway that I ran through because I didn't like what my regular roles were on TV. It was eye candy for someone, for the star or the dead wife or the scheming girlfriend or the crate. It was always in service to another character. There was never something full blown and understandable about my character. And it's very one-dimensional and boring. And this was something I felt like I could really sink my teeth into.
But it's true, and you brought so much character to Kira and the Bajorans. Michelle Forbes embodied the introduction of the Bajoran people in Trek, but you, Nana, actually took the role of Kira and virtually reinvented the culture and the strong leader that you played. Did you look to Michelle's portrayal of the Bajoran, or did you just go into this character with a blank slate?
They sent me all the, VHS back in the day. They sent me all the VHS to watch, and I didn't, because I had already auditioned, and I felt like they've accepted my version of this. I'm going to stick with that. So it was when I went back and watched all the Star Trek for the book's sake, I was knocked out by her performance. She was so good. It was such a good lesson for the writers that to have a fire starter ignited their regular cast. It forced Picard into such more interesting positions to have that kind of character up against him.
That's so cool how you're able to look back into the older series and see the shapes and the newer iterations of Star Trek.
Now, the next question is in 1994, the third season Avery Brooks episode titled Fascination, Lwaxana Troy's telepathy of love is falling onto the crew of Deep Space Nine, and Kira and Julian Bashir are in the infirmary. Now, we can see that there's a little bit of a glint in your eye for this romantic scene with the character Bashir, when your character, Kira, was supposed to be in a relationship with Vedic Bareil. What do you remember about this?
Well, I always felt like Vedic Bareil was such a strange choice for her to be with. They kind of had these hunks for me, which didn't make sense because, Major Kira wasn't, into that kind of performative female male stuff at all. So it was like, why this? Not anything against the actors at all. They were such handsome guys, but I just thought it was an odd choice for her. Much more, based in who a person is and what they look like and all that. And, well, Sid and I were friends. We were friends from the beginning, and he was at my house for many dinners, with many girlfriends. And, so we had a great relationship all that time. It ended up that we did get married and have a child together. So maybe the writers saw something we didn't see, but yeah, I'm glad what they finally, and maybe it was a test to see, hey, maybe this chemistry would work, but they never went further with it. But that Odo was this entity that had nothing to do with what he looked like, but who he was, I thought was such a great choice for Kira. I thought that was just right.
Yeah, it's really nice to see that Deep Space Nine was able to break away from a lot of the cliches that were prevalent in a lot of the shows of the time, no doubt.
Just another reason why Star Trek has the greatest fans.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll be right back to continue the interview for you and us, the fans, after this quick break.
A captain's log with special guest Nana Visitor returns in a moment.
You're doing great.
Oh, I don't feel great.
You're positively glowing.
Really?
I think so. But then I suppose my opinion doesn't really count.
Oh, it counts. But don't forget, this is still your fault.
My fault?
You performed the transfer from Keiko to me.
After you volunteered.
Oh, after you put the idea in my head.
After you flew the runabout into an asteroid field.
After you insisted we check on those anomalous bioscans.
That was Keiko!
Well, that's right, it was, but I'd rather blame you.
Whatever makes you happy. I never argue with my patients or my commanding officer.
And we're back for more questions with our Star Trek star, Nana Visitor. Now, Nana played Major Kira for 7 seasons on Star Trek Deep Space Nine and has reprised her role in Star Trek Lower Decks, the animated series.
Welcome to Deep Space Nine.
Did you know that Nana also has an asteroid named after her in honor of her time on Star Trek Deep Space Nine?
Oh, wow. I guess Nana's name will forever be amongst the stars on screen and in the sky.
Yes, no doubt about it. Let's get back to the interview. You're noticeably absent, Nana, from most of the production for the 1996 episode, The Assignment. Now, this was due to the fact that you gave birth to your son, Django. However, you continue to work and portraying your character Kira as a pregnant Kira until the 5th season episode, The Begotten, even after the real birth of your real son. Now, Kira still portrayed being pregnant. How was the maternity leave, if you even had some, and how did you juggle that with being a new mother while being on those long 12 to 15-hour days of the Deep Space Nine set?
Terribly. There's no way of doing it well that I know of. It was, bring the baby to my trailer. And by that time I had a 4-year-old son as well. And just have my brain split into 2. And the awful thing, I remember playing with my sons in my trailer, and I would learn my scenes. I decided if I'm going to have children and a job, nobody's going to suffer but me. That doesn't work. That never works. I ended up falling asleep on the road. I ground myself down during those years. And there would be the moment where I'd get home at, you never know, 2 a.m. sometimes earlier. And I'd have to learn the next day's work scenes, because when I was in the trailer, I was with the boys most times. This was not every day, but many times. And then there was the awful moment where I'd have to say, okay, Mama's going to work, close the door, the banger door, and walk. And from my trailer to the door of stage 4 or 17, wherever we were working, I had to be Kira and drop everything and compartmentalize whatever I was worried about happening with the boys. Boom, gone. Now I'm Kira.
Well, I'm so glad you were able to make it through the difficult times and even make some amazing Star Trek while going through it.
Yes. Now, Nana, I'm truly grateful you gave me a heads up about this next question, as it is explained heavily in your new book titled Star Trek, Open a Channel, A Women's Trek. Now, you and Terry Ferrell didn't really lean on each other during the production of DS9, but you became closer later from what I understand. Can you please talk about this and give us a little teaser on how we can read more about it in your book?
I talk about it in the chapter where I talk about Terry and the fact that in Hollywood, there are boxes and there are a lot of women boxes. And she was in the beautiful box. That's the most powerful one. I'm talking the 90s. Things have changed. Thank God, things have changed. But back then, the beautiful box meant that she would probably not only be the draw for the male audience, which on Star Trek, they knew they didn't realize how many women they had, I don't think. There's always been a large women audience for Star Trek as well. But she would, in other shows, she would be the one who would have the scenes with the leading man and get the most lines. And someone like me would be maybe not the best friend, not quite that, but maybe the lawyer or the businesswoman or an acquaintance or the bad girl.
Yes, it's very inspiring. You're able to look back into your mindset when you first started the show and see how that was warped by the TV and film industry to make you feel like maybe you're in a bit of a box. But how can that negatively affect how you view your peers? Tell us about this.
And it's so ugly to look back and think about myself that way. I don't like it. I don't like admitting that. But the fact is, if we don't start talking about these things that might make us feel uncomfortable, we'll never figure a way out of it. It didn't serve, any system that you're in, and Hollywood is a system just like any other. It doesn't serve the system. It didn't serve the system to have women aligned. And the book really goes through, it's always just like a drop. It's a tiny little thing to deal with. A comment, there'll be a shuttlecraft accident. You should have thought if you needed to go see your child who's sick, even though you have 6 hours before you're going to film, you should have thought of that before you took this job.
That is so powerful and so true. I love how you were able to replace those old fears with curiosity and support.
I don't know. Do you really think it'll make a difference to the Cardassians that you've been given a Starfleet commission? You're still a Bajoran.
A Bajoran with the authority to speak on behalf of the Federation.
You realize you're going to have to do something about your uniform as well.
Yes, absolutely. Now, let's move on to Season 7 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Your character, Kira, was promoted to Colonel and ultimately wore the Starfleet uniform. Were either of these influenced by you talking to writers and producers, or what was it like also feeling like wearing the Starfleet uniform for the first time in this final season?
No, I didn't influence it at all. I hope that I'm promoted past Colonel, because Colonel Kira sounds like I have a fast food franchise somewhere. I'm not really fond of it. I'm sorry, it stopped right there. But, so I call myself Major Kira. I spend most of the time as Major Kira, but yeah, I'm Colonel Kira. And the wearing the uniform was a big deal. A big deal. I couldn't wait to wear the uniform. I didn't want to come out of the uniform.
Oh, you look so cool in the Starfleet uniform. They already explained in Voyager that you can have a field commission. So I was like, well, yeah, why not? Oh, what just happened?
No, Nana, come back.
Oh my God, I completely forgot about
Mirror World Bryan. Yes, tremble in your fear. Vai dakish lachchu behoshkaj.
Power levels critical. Immediate shutdown of life support imminent.
Well, thanks for joining us this week on A Captain's Log. Going forward, we will be your new hosts. I'm Commodore Bryan K.
And I'm Lilith, the destroyer of Konos. We'll see you next week on My Captain's Log.
Hello, happy, my old friend. I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy. Ooh.